All right. And we're going to ready to rock here once. Hey, Facebook Live, it's our second and final session of the day. We're going to have 3, possibly 4 interviews, and it's going to rock. If you know, love, or work with any of these fine people, you're going to want to share it and help them spread their message for sure. All right, so we are live on the podcast piece in 3, 2, and we are live with John Torrens. John, are you ready to talk?
Yes, I am.
Professor John M. Torrens, Ph.D., is, I'm going to restart here because I'm going to scroll up. Professor John M. Torrens, Ph.D., is an entrepreneur, educator, and helps other people succeeding with raging ADHD. Your talk is called ADHD as an Entrepreneur's Superpower. John, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Nathan. Great to be here.
Don't you love Talk Universe with a bio like that, so short, you know it takes one to write one, and I can appreciate that because some of the bios I get are so long I have to trim them all down. I love in your talk, you talk about really your own growth journey. You talk about how the challenges of having ADHD can actually be flipped upside down, and they can actually be strengths in the proper context, John. So what are some of the contexts right off the bat? What are the contexts that you realize work for you and work for a whole lot of other people in the entrepreneur space, even not inside the entrepreneur space?
Yeah, so the main context we studied was in entrepreneurship. So the idea was that we had a hunch, with me knowing different entrepreneurs and people who have started businesses, the people that I hung out with just seemed to be very distractible or very impulsive or kind of like me in that regard. So there was a hunch that, a lot of these people had ADHD. And so we decided to just take a look at it. And what we found was that, even though ADHD can be quite disabling for a lot of people in many contexts, in the context of entrepreneurship, it can be quite an advantage because of a variety of things that come along with ADHD.
Yeah, well, and you go into detail about just not overthinking everything, being able to manage a whole lot of different things at one time, being able to delegate, all of these wonderful things. What am I leaving out, John? John, what am I leaving out there?
There were a few things that I didn't have time for in the talk. Yeah, so there, a couple of things that were really interesting is that we looked at serial entrepreneurship, and people with ADHD tend to just start more. Come of the study, we found that the people with ADHD were more likely to be in the process of starting a company at the time of the study, which was kind of interesting. The one of the other things was that their growth rates were much faster than those in the study without ADHD, which kind of makes sense because of that fast pace, that ants in your pants. They didn't tend to run the biggest companies of the sample we found, but they did tend to grow quite a bit faster.
Yeah. And the research that you do at, I believe it's University of Rochester, do you do actual research tracking this stuff? Was this based on, a bit of empirical data that you have assembled perhaps with your students or in your own pursuits?
Yeah, it's Syracuse University.
Syracuse, excuse me,
yeah.
down the state a little bit. Thanks for the correction.
Yeah, so my next door neighbor at the university, his name's Johan Wicklund, and he's a researcher in this area. And I just joined him for this one particular study. So we looked at people who were founders and CEOs of fast-growing companies just to see how it worked out. We are going to start to branch out into looking at students and entrepreneurship programs and see if there's any correlation there, because my hunch is that students are drawn to entrepreneurship. Possibly not necessarily because of the things I talked about in my talk, because of their impulsivity and things like that, but quite possibly because they just don't fit in a normal educational setting. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you can't go get a job because of all the disabling characteristics of ADHD, you may just have to create your own job and become an entrepreneur. Likewise, a student who has ADHD and is having trouble functioning, they may just gravitate towards entrepreneurship. So we're going to take a look at that in the next year.
You know, we were talking, or I was talking a little earlier today in other interviews. We talk about neurodiversity and all of this sort of thing. Is ADHD considered a part of neurodiversity, or is that not quite? I know it's not usually considered part of that, but the idea is working with strengths and in the right place, in the right setting. What could be a real liability for some people who are at the wrong place at the right time, or the wrong in the wrong time, can actually work out as a real strength in the right place at the right time.
No, yeah, it's certainly a type of neurodiversity for sure. So if you think about a normal educational setting, right, where students are at their desks and they're doing their work, or they're reading silently, or they're doing worksheets, that may not be the way a person with ADHD learns, right? They need to be up. They learn through motion and experience. So they don't fit in a lot of educational settings. So it is absolutely a diverse situation with somebody with ADHD.
Can you take us back to the light bulb moment for you, John? Because I know for a lot of us, and even personally, I think about some of the things that I do really well in my life, and then I think about some of the things that I don't do so well, and I don't ever want to shirk responsibility, but I do want to squarely face kind of my own wiring. Is there a light bulb moment for you in your life when you realized, hey, this is a strength, and I've got to try to mitigate some of these other effects, but I'm going to really deep dive this and use it as a real strength and a blessing, instead of treating it as something that I need to manage?
Yeah, so for most of my life, I kind of felt it was an advantage in a lot of ways. I just felt it enabled me to do things that maybe some of my peers just weren't able or willing to do. It's almost the reverse. There was a point, my company was fairly young, and I noticed that the people who were working with me were just having trouble managing me or managing the relationship with me. So then I figured, okay, so maybe this is an advantage in a lot of ways, but I do have to take it seriously and approach it like a business owner or a founder, CEO, and try to work with my direct reports so they could manage it better.
Well, that's even more fascinating to me, because how easy would it be for someone who has a very, very high creative drive, high energy, works faster, longer, earlier, later than everybody? I mean, all of the workplace success culture metrics that we have, especially in the United States, the hardest working, longest working country in the world, where we don't take our vacation days. I mean, for you to be willing to realize the impact that it can have in a not so good way on other people, and for you to take the personal growth steps to be able to connect with them, even though you're, the way that I'm framing it at least, in a real position of strength. What caused you to choose to do that?
Right. I remember just being in a meeting with a few of my key people, and the company was still pretty small at the time. But I just remember looking at their faces. We were clearly heading in one direction, and then one day I said, hey, I think we're going to go do this. And I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a lot of details. I was just going to go chase this other opportunity, when everybody else had already been kind of going down another route. And it was just too fast. It was too random, or it seemed too random. And I thought, okay, I'm going to lose these people if I don't get my own act together, or at least somehow signal changes, or provide some data and rationale for why I need to do this, or why I want to do that. Maybe seek their input on it and have them, explain to me why we should slow down, or what are some of the details that I'm missing. So it was really just in an effort to keep people that I thought were really good.
Well, I love that realization, because no matter how bright, how fast, how quick, how hard work, I mean, we need a team, and leaders go from me to we, and leaders don't cross the finish line alone. And, perhaps for you, it sounds to me like there may have been a few early smaller finish lines, and you came to the place where you realized, hey, it's almost not worth it if I'm the only one crossing another finish line by myself. I care about these people. I want to bring them up to the top of the mountain, be a Sherpa for them, so to speak. Can you relate to that, or do you have a different take on it?
Yeah, maybe a slightly different take, right?
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
my my impulsivity, or my ability to not overthink things, right, or lack of premeditation, you could call it, maybe not thinking things through, sometimes could end up being really advantageous because I could take advantage of opportunities faster than other people. But it could also have some really detrimental side effects, right? If I don't think things all the way through, maybe I'm missing something that could be really bad. So just, I guess, that acknowledgement and the realization that my team could probably add quite a bit of value and help me prevent some of those things was one of the motivations.
So we've been enjoying this talk with John Torrens. His TEDx Syracuse University talk was called ADHD as a Entrepreneur's Superpower, and we're going to hear more about it in just a moment in the Blitz Round. And we're back. It's time for the Blitz Round with John Torrens. I'm about to ask John a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent TEDx Syracuse University talk. John, are you ready?
I am.
All right. Were you invited to speak, or did you apply?
I applied.
All right. Were you in the zone, or did you have nerves, or neither or both?
I was in the zone.
How does that look when you're in the zone for you?
Yeah, just calm, confident. Yeah.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
A blender.
How does that serve you? Can you describe how you blend the whole piece together?
Yeah, I knew the points I needed to hit, and every time I practiced it, I might have done it a slightly different way, but it just, it came off as more extraneous, or extemporaneous, rather. Yeah.
Okay, so a blend of both makes it more natural and real to the audience, for sure. John, what's a tip, tool, or a technique that helped you?
Really just preparation and practice, right? So the crew that we did it with, TEDx Syracuse University, we had regular rehearsals, and they had us submit drafts for milestones, and we did a lot of practicing. So by the time I got to the day of the talk, I wasn't really worried about what I was saying. I was able to enjoy the stage and the atmosphere and engage with the audience really well.
Yeah. Now, this is the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out?
The most painful part of the I think there was a lot of data in the research that I just wanted to add in there, but it just became too much, so we decided to trim that down.
Good for you. Doesn't sound like that was too hard. If I'm talking to somebody that gave a talk on ADHD as a superpower, maybe it's not too difficult to let all the extra content go. Some of us, we want to hold on to that thing. It's like prying it from our cold dead hands. But Talk Universe, this is a good lesson to learn. Cut it down. If there's ever a doubt as to whether it's going to resonate with the audience, it's probably not going to resonate. So just cut it out. Do everybody a favor and do a shorter talk. John, last question for you. What's the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
So the gentleman who was going right before me got about 3 or 4 minutes into his talk, and they realized that the recording equipment wasn't working. So the MC had to come out, stop the audience, restart the talk, and that was, it didn't really affect me that much. Only that was kind of bizarre. Yeah, I felt
that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Incidentally, was the MC pretty smooth in doing that? That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, they had several of them, and they kind of went back and forth, and they did a great job. Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear. We've been talking to Dr. John Torrens. His TEDx Syracuse University talk is called ADHD as the Entrepreneur's Superpower. And if you want to find out more about that, you can join us and go to our show notes page at bethetalk.com. We will have a clickable link where you can actually check that out and watch John's talk. As well as we'll have a second link for John's LinkedIn profile. You can connect with John, find out about this and other research. If you are an entrepreneur with ADHD and you want to find some of the goods as to some of the advantages, truly the superpower advantages statistically that John and his team have discovered, you're going to want to reach out to him on LinkedIn as well. And we'll be back with John Torrens for the final 10-second word of advice in just a moment. And we're back with John Torrens. It is time for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
All right.
Hit me. What is it?
I thought you were gonna. Okay, so for me, I would say try to add a little bit of humor. I mean, I'm generally a pretty funny guy, and my own wife liked somebody else's talk better than mine because she thought it was a little more funny. And so, if you have any kind of humor you can interject and get the audience laughing with you, I think that would be a great thing.
John Torrens, thanks so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any advice to Bidushi and Steve? Welcome, Steve.
No, just have fun with it. It's pretty easy.
Awesome. Yeah, we try to have some fun. I'm unmuting the both of you. So welcome, Steve. We are doing really fantastic on time, thanks to all of you. I love it because, Steve, you were basically like still a minute ahead, and we were already jumping in with the interview. So, and we had done a little bit of small talk, so I let you in a little bit later than that. We are doing tremendous on time. Bidushi, you ready to rock?
I am. This
awesome.
will be fun.
Awesome. And Steve, just so that I know that your mic is working, just say something to me.
Hello.
I can hear you. All right. Now that you said that, I'm going to remute you. And I'm going to, John's already muted again. So Bidushi Bhattacharya. And I'm still saying that correctly, correct?
You are. Yeah,
I
perfect.
am. All right. Very good. And I'm going to do a better job for all of you folks at home, because I'm screen sharing on Zoom. This is what I have to do to get my notes here on my second screen, and I have to do a little bit more scrolling than I would originally like to. So it looks like we're doing pretty well. Let me practice your bio, and then we'll go right back into the recording within the Facebook Live broadcast. And again, Facebook Live, Bidushi's friends, family, fans, co-workers, this is not the creepy kid from The Shining. This is share. Put your finger over the share button. Help Bidushi share her amazing message. So I'm going to practice your bio. Dr. Bidushi Bhattacharya is a astropreneur. I didn't say that out loud before. Is an astropreneur, ex-NASA scientist, and TEDx speaker. She is building the new space ecosystem in Southeast Asia and beyond through training and incubation. Man, great stuff. What space exploration can bring us? It was TEDx Singapore, correct?
That's right.
Getting my deets correct. All right. Any questions for me before we jump in?
No, we're good. Thank you.
All right. Well, good. Well, we are live in 3, 2. We are live with Bidushi Bhattacharya. Bidushi, are you ready to talk?
Yeah, I am. This will be fun.
Dr. Bidushi Bhattacharya is an astropreneur, ex-NASA scientist, and TEDx speaker. She's building the new space ecosystem in Southeast Asia and beyond through training and incubation. Bidushi Bhattacharya, welcome to the talk.
Thanks for having me.
I love your line of your talk. What got us up there makes life better for us down here. I love your optimism. You say we're going to get to Mars. However, there's no need, unlike some other entrepreneurs or astropreneurs, to abandon the Earth. It doesn't need to be uninhabitable. You are a real, I don't want to just call you an optimist, but I think it's a realist, because you have data and proof that things really are getting better as long as we abandon the fatalism, or at least hold it in check. That's a mouthful. Dr. Bidushi Bhattacharya, welcome to the talk.
Thank you.
So what got us up there makes life better for us down here. I'd love for you to just take us back behind the talk and some of the research and discoveries that you've made.
So I think a lot of people look at space exploration as an extravagance, as a use, as spending money in an area where we really shouldn't be, because there's so much going on Earth. But if you think about the number of innovations, the number of things that have happened in the course of space tech development that have helped us here, it's innumerable. You can think about everything from ear thermometers, those infrared thermometers that we use, to everybody knows about Teflon, all kinds of data analytics that we're doing. And, with all the climate change that we've had recently, there's been a lot of use of satellite data to identify regions where there's been flooding or isolated villages that need to be rescued. The applications today are just innumerable.
For sure. And at one point, just to illustrate things, you hold, I think it was some kind of a satellite camera up, and it went from being millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to like $250,000. And you illustrate the economy of scale and how when we send up what was a new technology, it comes back down, and then in the form of whatever it might be, solar panels, not necessarily something you mentioned in your talk, but we see how the price of those panels have gone down when more and more millions of people start using those. So what actually did you hold up? Because I'm a little fuzzy. It was some sort of a camera, correct?
That was a full-on satellite. That was a satellite. It flies by itself. Yeah, it fits in the palm of your hand. And it flies by itself through space. It's got solar panels on the outside for power, and it weighs 1.1 kilograms. It's the real deal, and we're launching hundreds per year.
So basically, we're sending up not just drones in our backyard, but almost like a satellite drone.
Because they're really small and deployable. Yeah, they're the price of a fancy car, including launch. And just like your cell phone is a miniature computer from decades ago, these satellites are easy to build. You could go on YouTube right now and figure out how to put one together. And it's a real game changer.
My own satellite.
Right now. Sorry?
I could create my own satellite by watching YouTube videos.
You could do it. You could order the parts. You could put one together. And then if you were willing to throw out some cash, you could actually launch one yourself. Students are doing this in high schools, universities. Startups are doing this all over the place. We're at this amazing point right now where there's such a disruption in the sector.
Absolutely. Now, what a great way to be able to learn. If you're a student right now, if you're a STEM student or looking for a project, or maybe you teach and you have a little bit of leeway in the summertime, what a great thing to put together. If it's as simple as the phrase, it's kind of a silly phrase, monkey see, monkey do. We can watch these YouTube videos and just sort of imitate that and learn maybe the principles underlying that as we do it, or even later. Is that literally what people are doing, Bidushi?
Well, that's basically the idea of what we're doing. We don't say monkey see, monkey do. We
I know
say
that sounds a little silly, but laptop to launch pad. Yeah.
So you can, in fact, take a course. We offer these courses where you can figure out how to put a satellite together and do simulated operations. And the whole point of this is to get the future space workforce ready. Space is no longer an area where only the elite can have access. On a global scale, space and space tech are being democratized. And the only way we're really going to make progress is we can get people on a global scale to participate. And that's the whole motivation behind what we're doing, to just get the word out.
So I've got to ask you this question. And normally, if you weren't an ex-NASA scientist, this would be kind of an inappropriate gotcha question. But you're in the field, and I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago the president of the United States announced a Space Force, and that they are putting all kinds of new resources into NASA and space, and I guess a new branch of the government. I'm not really sure, because there was so much kind of late night fodder about it just because of the sound of it. But I would imagine in your career at NASA, things were going the opposite direction. Things were getting defunded, if I'm not mistaken, and that must have been very discouraging to you. So what is your take and read on the state of things right now?
So I think, over the past 30 years that I've been working on space tech, there's been a finite pot of money from NASA that's been allocated to different projects. So they fund something more, then something else gets cut. But I think today space is global, so we can't just think of NASA and the U.S. as the source of space tech development. And I don't know what the U.S. is going to do. I don't know what the Space Force is going to look like. But I think that we're not the only ones in the business right now. So the rest of the world is catching up very quickly.
Well, and it's democratized. Isn't that wonderful?
democratized.
It's space is democratized, and if you want a picture of what democratization looks like, completely opposite. Some of you talk universe. I've done some humanitarian missions off the grid in Africa, and one of the things that absolutely struck me: imagine being in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road driving and watching people, as you would expect, walking down the street carrying their water and shepherding sheep, but exactly like Bidushi just did. Those of you that are on the podcast right now, you can't see what she just did. Yeah, they're talking on their cell phone. And I'm sitting here a couple of years ago, and it's totally shattering the image, and I'm thinking, you know what, this is wonderful. It's completely democratized. They don't need to install these silly telephone poles or go under the ground or be wired. Africa can catch up to the rest of the world and surpass the rest of the world, and that's what's happening in space. So I'd love for you to contribute your thoughts even more about that, Bidushi.
So in the past, if you were a smaller country with fewer resources, and let's just say you wanted images of an area where there had been flooding due to a hurricane, you relied on the bigger countries to hand you data if and when they got it. But now you can go in, launch your own small CubeSats, take images where you want, when you want, and have complete control. And the other real amazing thing about these small satellites is because they're so inexpensive, you can launch a new one every year and just put the latest and greatest in terms of cameras and sensors on it. So what you launch today will be superseded by what's launched next year and so on. So the technology that everybody's developing on a global scale can now be incorporated by the smallest of nations. Wow.
So now I got to ask this question, because we're always we want to always be thinking sustainability. So I know that a small satellite like the one that was like the size of a extra large softball, it looked like, that's wonderful because it's just a tiny fraction of what we used to send up. On the other hand, I'm wondering, is this a single-use satellite? It sounds like it. Is there any way to be aware, and what are people doing with all, I've heard it called space junk, all of just the different things that we're throwing up there? Is there a plan for that right now? Is that something that people are focusing on, developing a plan? What's the thought in terms of the other end of the sustainability piece?
I really like that question because, 150 years ago, nobody would have thought about polluting the oceans, and now we've got that plastic island floating around. In space, in fact, this could be an issue in the longer run. There are agreements in place now where people have to deorbit their CubeSats within 25 years of them being up there, and they're small, so they will burn up in the atmosphere. We do have mechanisms in place, and people are actually starting to put on tech to have them come back down to Earth when they've stopped operating.
So that was a new word for me and probably Talk Universe, deorbit. I love that.
Deorbit, yeah.
So how does that work? They just have it's almost like the old Mission Impossible, this message will self-destruct. Is that kind of the idea?
You don't want to do that because if you have your satellite explode, it's traveling at 20,000 miles an hour. It's going to create thousands of pieces of debris, and something the size of a piece of sand can shred a solar sail up there if it's moving at 20,000 miles an hour relative to you. So
all right, don't do that, Talk Universe. Don't put that feature in your micro satellite. Go on.
Don't try this at home. What people typically do, where CubeSats typically are, there's a residual amount of atmosphere. It's very, very tenuous, but there is an atmosphere up there. So you could increase your profile to create drag. So people actually put down a cable. People are talking about putting tiny bits of propulsion on board for that sort of last gasp, that last hit to sort of drive you down into the atmosphere. There are a lot of options out there that people are exploring, but the bottom line is people are aware of this problem, and we're going to make sure that these puppies don't stay up there after they've stopped working.
Wow. So we've been enjoying this talk. I'd love to talk even more with Bidushi Bhattacharya. Her TEDx Singapore talk was called What Space Exploration Can Bring Us, and in a moment we're going to talk with Bidushi some more in the Blitz Round. And we're back with the Blitz Round with Bidushi Bhattacharya. It is time to ask her a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her recent TEDx Singapore talk. Are you ready, Bidushi?
I am.
First question, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I was invited based on some other talks I had given.
All right. Now, you walk on stage. Did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
It was both. Look, space is an easy sell. So whenever I talk about space and space tech, people get off their phones. They actually sit up and pay attention to what's being said. It's a lot of fun.
Different question than I normally ask. Is there a special space-related cartoon or television show that you liked growing up?
I was definitely a Star Trek fan. Yep, not Star Wars, Star
Not
Trek.
Star Wars, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite character? Was it
Captain Kirk?
Not Uhuru. It was Captain Kirk.
No, it was Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk. All right. Memorizer, improviser, or blender? Which do you do?
I prefer to be an improviser. For the TEDx talk, we did have to memorize. It was a much more structured event, as you know. But because I believe in this stuff and I'm so passionate, I really like to feed off of the audience and just get going with whatever the audience sort of responds to.
All right. What is a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
I would say just practice. Like everybody else says, it's pretty obvious, and know what you're talking about and feel it.
Yeah, feel it, and passion will win the day for sure. This is the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you may have had to cut out?
I would have loved to have given hundreds of more examples of innovations that we've had because of space technology, but you just can't fit all that in.
Can you give me one very quickly right now, since we can go behind the talk here?
I would say I didn't really talk much about Teflon, which is used in everything from medical to plumbing to kitchen applications. So it's sort of across the board.
Cool. What was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk, Bidushi?
Oh, this is funny. So one of the things I did in my talk was I talked about Mylar blankets that we use now for camping, and they've been used to help refugees. They were actually used as thermal blankets on spacecraft originally, and you can order them on Amazon. They're like a couple dollars each. And I had a bag of those, and I had to pull one out for the talk. So as I was going through pulling this blanket out, I was surrounded by like a dozen people saying, "Oh my God, can I have one? Those are so cool." And people were so excited to be getting one of these Mylar blankets.
Oh, I love it. And you do that right at the end. You actually wrap yourself up in a blanket that's less than a paper sheet wide, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's thinner than a sheet of paper. You got it.
My gosh. Well, we've been enjoying this talk with Bidushi Bhattacharya, and her talk is called What Space Exploration Can Bring Us. I would be remiss if I forgot, which I'm not going to forget, go to our talk page at bethetalk.com. Our show notes, we're going to have a link to that talk right there in the show notes. Additionally, you want to connect with Bidushi. This is neat stuff. And her website is bse-space.com, correct?
Correct.
And we'll also have your LinkedIn profile there for people to connect with you. Again, Bertha Samuel Emmanuel -space.com, just to spell it out.
SPACE, right?
SPACE.com. And we'll be back with Bidushi in just a moment for the 10-second final word of advice. And we're back with Bidushi Bhattacharya. It is time for the final word of advice.
So space technology is real. It's happening on the commercial side, and in the next 3 to 5 years, it's really going to take off, pun intended, and you need to get involved. Whatever you're doing here on Earth today can be applied to space, and I hope to see you there.
Bidushi Bhattacharya, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing your wisdom and these amazing tips and state of the space industry with Talk Universe today.
Thanks for your time.
And that's a wrap. Man, that was fun. Fun stuff. Going to unmute the rest of you. Wasn't that great? And I unmuted John again, and we're remuting each other. I'm going to lay off.
We're good. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Very cool.
Bidushi, any advice for Steve? He's on deck here.
Yeah, well, you've seen us talk. It's a lot of fun, actually. So, just go with it.
It goes by fast.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a weird blend of me trying to stay in the zone and present with all the other stuff that, mechanics and whatnot going. Steve, I took a look at your background a little bit more before you had even accepted, and it was absolutely wonderful because, not just the Post-it note stuff, but you've done, TEDx stuff all over the world. I'm a little fuzzy because I didn't take the the extra review time, so I really apologize for that. But before we go on the record, I want to sound a little bit more intelligent than I actually am. Did you help? Were you with Mid-Atlantic a little bit? Were you in Africa co-organizing or organizing? You've done some really epic stuff, and then off the grid, like or was it Everest? Were you doing something like that? I'm trying to place it, and I apologize for having
you're good. All kinds of stuff. So
I apologize for that, but bring me up to speed.
Yeah, so we did the first TEDx I was involved in was TEDx PSU at Penn State University.
Oh, that's
so
it.
We did TEDx
okay.
PSU, and then I did TEDx J&J corporate events all over the world.
And you founded J&J, and you took that all over the world, and now you're this cool idea manifester person, which is really, really neat.
So we started kind of the TEDx corporate model and kind of that whole stuff. And then, I've done a bunch of different adventure stuff. And I lived in India and lived in sub-Saharan Africa. And we did Kilimanjaro. And then I did that Mongol rally where we drove from London to Ulaanbaatar. And so
that's what it was. You were in like a 4x4 and you did some kind of off-the-grid epic kind of thing.
And actually in a 1991 Fiat Panda with a 750cc engine. Yeah, we drove 10,000 kilometers, a third of the circumference of Earth. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So now, did you and thank you for all of that, because now I'm not gonna be as likely to say some crazy spectacular ish thing other than the spectacular things that you said already. So did you help form PSU, or was that was J&J?
So started TEDx PSU.
You started PSU, Penn State University, which I've interviewed plenty of other people. Actually my best performing. Most listened to podcast episode is with a PSU alumni, actually, and then you went to J&J and the corporate thing worked, and then you're an idea guy as well. What I love about you is you've got enough people implementing it, and you put the focus on implementing it. And I love the science of, and I'm sorry we're talking so much, but I'm just trying to get my facts straight here before because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable with horrible fake facts, unlike other people that we may know out there from different angles. But the science of if you have a bright idea, I'm more likely to implement your bright idea, or vice versa, because I'm so in love with my own idea and I don't actually implement it. That was really, really helpful nugget to be able to see. So what I'd like to do, let's I'll try to put in enough of those extracurricular things, just because that's pretty unusual and cool. And you've been. If you founded Penn State and J&J and all that, you've been in this world for 7-8 years of the TEDx world, at least, if not much longer than that, to be able to pioneer. So bring me up to
the last 9-10 years.
9-10 years. Okay, so that may be very helpful. So essentially, you're an organizer then.
An organizer, speaker,
organizer. So
speakers,
it's always good to talk to organizers as well. We may need to circle back if you're willing to do so for some bonus content, just because there's going to be way too much of this stuff to be able to unpack. So what I'd like to do is try to hit on briefly as many of those things, properly frame it, and then we may have a little bit of extra time to do a bonus session. And I would like to I'd like to get a piece of this from the primarily, I'll just say, with the organizer's hat on, and then we'll go into your talk. But that's a powerful perspective for listeners to hear, because we want to make them more likely to be accepted, come to the table with real value, and then once they're in, for organizers like to play nice with the team, be an asset to your crew, even though you're not necessarily actively doing this, but we want to make them aware of all those dynamics. Sorry for the prequel. Wanted
That's
to,
great.
I'm interviewing another 9 people today, and I'm like, oh, that's Steve, and I'm still a little cloudy, so we have a little bit of extra time to clarify that so that I don't go on the record with wrong info and look silly with all that. Any final questions for me at this point?
No, your materials were super helpful, so I'm excited to dig in. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much. People are super busy, and I'm too much of an instructional designer. I used to teach that in graduate school, so it's really bad because it's like this isn't Johnson & Johnson's instructional design. People do not have so thank you for saying that. I'm always room for improvement and room for simplification, but we're gonna dive into this.
Your gray shirt video was good.
The gray shirt video, well, it helps to be human. It helps to have a little bit of fun. All right, and now here's a great place to start your bio. Practicing with your bio, and it's Garguilo. Garguilo.
Yes, sir.
Garguilo. Okay.
Even my mom doesn't get it, so it's okay. It's all right.
All right, so this is my practice bio. Steve Garguilo works with people from all walks of life, from all over the world, to help them make their ideas happen. His book, Surge, Your Guide to Put Any Idea into Action, is an Amazon bestseller. Steve is co-founder of Action Surge and partner at Cultivate. And then we've got let's see here, stevegarguilo.com is the website. Okay. All right, blasted PDFs on a tablet I have that splits the thing, and I'm not going to be doing it that way again. Any final questions for me, Steve?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. In 3, 2. We are live with Steve Garguilo. Steve, are you ready to talk?
Oh, I'm ready.
Steve Garguilo works with people from all walks of life all over the world to help them make their ideas happen. Steve's book, Surge, Your Guide to Put Any Idea into Action, is an Amazon bestseller. Steve is co-founder of Action Surge and partner at Cultivate. And you know what? I'm going to add to your bio here, Steve, because you are founder and first organizer of TEDx Penn State University, PSU, TEDx J&J for Johnson & Johnson. You've been all over the world road tripping, doing amazing stuff. We're going to start there, but Steve Garguilo, welcome to the talk.
Thanks for having me.
I got a lot of rich insights out of your talk, the science of taking action. The number one nugget, as I shared previously, is that if I have an idea, you are more likely to implement my idea or vice versa than the person that comes up with the idea. That's the primary takeaway, and what a teaser, because I want to backtrack before we talk about the Talk Universe. We're backtracking because founder and first organizer of TEDx Penn State University, TEDx J&J, we need to talk about the organizer piece for a little bit, and I want you to bring us up to speed on your road rally activities and the other notable things that you've done before we plow ahead with the interview. Over to you,
Sure.
Steve.
So, I mean, TED Talks, I think, first started becoming popular online in 2006, 2007, a lot of us seeing them. And I remember being on Facebook and seeing a friend of mine had RSVP'd to go to TEDx CMU at Carnegie Mellon University. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm a recent alum of Penn State. Maybe there's one at Penn State. I'm like, when is it? And I looked and there wasn't one. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. And I was like, well, there should be one. How do we do it? And so put together a team and we did TEDx PSU. And I thought it was just going to be this one-off thing. But then you see the impact for some of these speakers in terms of changing their lives. We had the speaker, Sam Richards, who talked about, having authentic conversations with people in the Middle East. And it spun up this whole new center for him at the university, different kinds of impact like that. And that got me really hooked into the TEDx world.
Yeah, well, and this is a long time ago. I mean, I know in recent years it's really, really blown up in the last 4 or 5 years. But you were there in the early days, relatively early days. It goes, you read the book and you find out how far back it goes. But what was it like? What was the universe like of TED 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when you first got started? And more importantly, what kind of credibility did you have to be able to found TEDx Penn State University and then do it again at Johnson & Johnson?
Sure. I mean, back then it was very much the wild, wild west in terms of TEDx. I mean, the first TEDx event was in 2009, and then we did this in 2010, and there were kind of a few dozen of us who were getting things started. In terms of my credibility, I was just a guy with a Gmail address with an idea, and I think that's the best kind of people sometimes. And so just signed up and did it. I mean, the license is free. Like, I was like, I don't need anyone's permission. We're just going to do it, and then got people on board as we went. And yeah, that veteran crew of organizers, the folks who've been around for the past decade or so, it's a pretty strong bond of the kind of global community we started. There was this TEDx summit in Doha in 2012 with all these organizers from around the world. It was like a UN type thing. It was amazing. So it's really cool group. It's
pretty amazing. And I know that still, remarkably, Talk Universe, you're listening to this, you could be an organizer. It's a lot easier than you think. You just go to TED.com and you read all of the things. And I believe at the time of this recording, it's the easiest thing, to my knowledge, is to get a library license, because then you can actually play recorded TED Talks, maybe have a speaker or two. I know to be an organizer in different sizes and with certain liberties and licenses, you do have to go through a little bit of a not a membership, but you have to travel and go to some events and meet up with other organizers. A little bit more of an onboarding than we had with Steve. But I still think it's an amazing opportunity, especially that library license. Go walk down the street, your local library, get the TV out, make sure that you're doing everything, kosher. But it's amazing. What are your views on how democratized this has been, Steve?
Yeah, I think if you're someone who's passionate about amplifying ideas from your community, it's such a great format to do that. And like you said, these small events, anybody can apply to have a license for, fewer than 100 people participating. If you want more than that, you have to go to a TED event and all that stuff, and there's expense related to it. But just this idea of being able to amplify really interesting ideas from your community and give them a platform and give them a voice in a broader world is really an incredible thing. Similar to like what you're doing in this podcast, but I think that kind of thing is just amazing.
Well, and it's all about going behind the talk, sharing the stories, and really giving Talk Universe or anyone that's going to a TED event or a TEDx event, getting the real backstories and giving you the tools that you need to take the effort and the time that you're going to put into your idea worth sharing. We just want to give you and arm you with all of the resources that maybe that Steve didn't have, that I didn't have when I applied as just a speaker. If you're going to put your best foot forward, we want to resource and equip you so that it's even a better idea, that it's even more sticky, that it's even less about you, more about the idea, all of those other things. What are your thoughts? I mean, you've been part of this for a long time. So what are some of the high points that you see with the movement? I know, if I'm not mistaken, you're not actively organizing things right now because you're doing too many other things. What are your thoughts? Does it kind of warm your heart to see what's happened with the brand and the popularity? Obviously, that comes with a little bit of mixed things, but what are the positive things that you see, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, from an organizer perspective, the idea that we've been connected as this global community of change makers, and that I can, pick up the phone or write a message to someone in Bucharest or in Shanghai or in Christchurch or whatever, and find a kindred spirit of someone who's passionate about their community and passionate about ideas. I mean, that's tremendously invaluable in terms, personally. As far as I think what that means to the world, I think it's helped make the world an even smaller place in terms of connecting us and our ability to share ideas and talk about what's happening in our communities. So I think it's a really rare and also, incredible thing.
Tell me a little bit about tweaking the model, TEDx J&J, Johnson & Johnson, so right up the street outside of, in central Jersey. and I used to live at the time over the river in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, probably at the same time that you were pioneering all this. What was that like? Was that a model that someone else had pioneered, the corporate piece, and you were one of the early adopters, or did you actually have the idea to bring it into a pharmaceutical company? And tell us a little bit about that, if you could.
Yeah, it was our team that created the first, TEDx corporate platform, which was kind of cool. To be honest, it came from two insights colliding. One insight colliding was, hey, here I am in this massive company as an idea guy who's trying to make stuff happen and having challenges like anyone would in a big company, getting people to embrace new thinking and working the system, right? So that is happening at the same time that I had just had this TEDx PSU experience, which was transformational in terms of helping people to make new ideas happen. So that kind of merged into this, well, why not try TEDx J&J and see what that can be? And so that was, we brought together 60 people in a bar after hours, had a few speakers. I made a little makeshift website, put the talks up, and then I started getting calls from different people around J&J, a call from somebody in Singapore, a call from somebody in Canada, a call from somebody in Morocco. And they're like, hey, can we organize TEDx J&J? Like, sure. And so help them. And then it started to be, creating this community of change makers from across Johnson & Johnson. And then that turned into, that's a whole other story of kind of 6 years into creating a grassroots movement to change the culture and all that. But it can be really powerful in a corporate system when you give people permission to finally start working on some new ideas.
Well, and that's what's blowing my mind. You can't see it right now on the podcast, but there's a visible stream of steam and smoke. It's good steam. It's not angry steam. I'm just like, this is frying my brain, because any of you talk universe with jobs in corporate environments, you know that to stay competitive, a lot of times you can't be as wildly innovative. You can't be finger painting like your 4-year-old son or daughter in kindergarten or preschool. You've got to, validate, stick with what works. And then if you're in a highly regulated environment like banking or pharmaceuticals or the medical industry or healthcare or anything like that, there's even less. So it's a very difficult place. And that's, kudos to you, Steve. It's almost like the old cheesy 80s commercial for Reese's peanut butter cup. The one person's going around the corner eating a chocolate bar, the other person's coming around eating peanut butter, and they smack into each other, and they end up with the Reese's peanut butter cup. And it's like what you did. You found the power of these ideas were spreading, the culture, this other culture that was beginning to emerge, that was really, it was almost like a Burning Man for corporate kind of a feel, and you were able to bring that into a very highly regulated environment where they have everything to lose. They do have to be competitive and they have to be innovative, but there's a little bit of a comfort zone, let's say, and they have everything to lose, and yet you were able to bring in this innovative subculture and go out for drinks for people later and have it recur year after year after year, and another submodel. Mouthful, but your response to all of that.
Yeah, people are thirsty for sharing ideas of their own, and people are also thirsty to be hearing new ideas and learning new ideas, right? And so I think it's an easy sell to get people engaged in something where they have the chance to have this almost brain spa for the mind. The key then, from a corporate perspective, are what are the outcomes and what comes out of that. And so that was a big driving force then behind, as I continued to want to shape that community, is how do we drive towards outcomes? How do we drive towards action, towards impact, and actually realizing both, personal and leadership outcomes for individuals, but also commercial outcomes of products and all that too. And so as we started to see some of that kind of stuff, then it really becomes a movement that gets executives' attention. And it's like, hey, let's put more resources behind that. And that's how we were able to grow this whole thing. But it was quite the journey. And then now, a lot of other organizations are adopting similar models, which is great.
For sure. And Steve, you are a guy, you know how to speak outcomes-based language. You know how to speak the language of results, the language of executive decision-making. And I think that's what's really unique about you, as opposed to a lot of other people out there that are really into ideas. And ideas are great, but it gets so loosey-goosey so quickly unless it's tied to those key stakeholder outcomes. So my question to you, Were you always this way, or did you learn quickly to tie this into something that would matter in the mind of a decision maker in order to stay in that lane?
Yeah, I think just like you said, right, ideas are cheap and action is expensive, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And so I think the more I got into this TEDx world of sharing ideas, I felt like I became this idea magnet with people always talking to me about their ideas. And I saw so little follow through that I started to get obsessed with, well, why is that? What is it that's causing that? And so started studying with psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, drill sergeants, like what is the actual science of action? What sparks people to act and what holds people back from acting? And then, through that research, work to incorporate what are the best ways that we can actually get people and support people to finally take action on things.
Powerful stuff. Man, can you briefly, we're taking a little bit of extra time here, but I'd love to hear about your road trip literally around the world. And was that, I think before you ever accepted, when I was reaching out to you, I had read all kinds of stuff. I read an article, maybe on TED.com. I think it might have been on the website about your road trip, basically connecting all of the people that you met all over a significant portion of the world. So I'd love to hear about that briefly.
Yeah, so there's an annual charity rally that happens every year called the Mongol Rally, where people drive from London to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. And you have to do it in as absurd of a vehicle as possible. So in a vehicle that's totally not up to the task. And so we decided, hey, we want to do this, but along the way, we want to meet fellow TEDx organizers and meet their communities, because whose couch is better to sleep on than the person who knows everybody in their city, who knows all the cool creative things, who can show you the clock tower bell, whatever, right? And so from London to Maastricht in the Netherlands, into Munich, into Vienna, and then all the way into places like Minsk and places like Almaty and Novosibirsk, and we're talking Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, like these former CIS countries, which are fascinating in their own right. But getting to meet the fascinating people in these places was, obviously like a life-changing experience, as you can imagine.
My gosh. So we've been talking with Steve Garguilo. His talk is called The Science of Taking Action. You got to watch that talk because he talks about action storming. He talks about a lot of proprietary things that he has invented to tie in the language of ideas with the language of expensive but profitable action. And we didn't even have time to go through all that. You want to watch that talk. And when we come back with Steve Garguilo in just a moment, I'll let you know after the Blitz round where you can go to find that. And we're back with Steve Garguilo. It is time for the Blitz round. Are you ready, sir?
Let's do it.
All right, so I'm thinking let's do this. So we want to have a bonus session because you're a former organizer. You're one of the earliest multi-organizers. I definitely want to have your organizer hat on, but right now we've kind of strayed away from your original talk. Let's start with that in the Blitz round, and then we'll come back and have another round with your organizer hat on. Fair enough?
Okay, great.
Look for the bonus content, everybody. First off, your talk, The Science of Taking Action. Were you invited or did you apply?
I was invited.
I bet you were. I bet you were. Of all the people out there, you should probably invite Steve. He's earned the right to be invited for sure. Steve, did you have nerves or were you in the zone? How do you approach that? Neither, both? How does it work?
Yeah, I think in the zone when you know your content, just like everybody on this podcast does, right? But then I think still you're not being honest if you don't have a little bit of nerves. So I think it's a little bit of nerves to want to deliver really well for that audience. This talk was in Tunisia, so I also wanted to make sure it was locally appropriate and all that. But once you're on stage, I think the nerves went away and it's just boom, let's do it.
Now for you, are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, I would say blender from the perspective of, I'm a big proponent of prepare, and know really well what the type of content you want is, and then probably memorize an outline version of it, of knowing point A to B to C, etc. And then it's improvising the actual, word for word of getting there.
What's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
I think, spending time actually brain dumping of just what's every possible piece of content, both emotional and analytical, that I might want to incorporate in this, and just spending time getting everything out. And then the editing work is the hard work of, I love all my kids, but I can't take them all to the park today. And so I have to figure out what are the most salient pieces to put. But I think starting really big picture is very, very helpful.
What's the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
Yeah. Well, so I was trying to find ways to incorporate more like local language and local, things. And a very common thing in the Arab world is people say, inshallah, basically like, if God wills it, like, maybe it'll happen.
It gave you a great laugh.
So I was like, maybe I'm going to throw in one of these. And it got a huge laugh, more so than expected. It kind of like threw me off guard. So I was like, I got to throw in a couple more throughout the way.
That was a beautiful moment because, I wasn't even, I go through so many talks to review them to prep for the show. And it instantly localized me somewhere probably in the Arab world or somewhere where there's, you were really connecting in an appropriate way. And you got a nice laugh. And you were even a little, off, for just half a second because it impacted you. So that was a beautiful moment. I love that you reminded me of that. Hey, everybody, we are talking with Steve Garguilo. This has been an extra fun Blitz round about his talk at TEDx Carthage. It was called The Science of Taking Action. And I would be remiss if I didn't send you over to the show notes page at bethetalk.com where you can watch that talk, as well as you can go to stevegarguilo.com. His last name is spelled Garguilo.com. Garguilo, stevegarguilo.com. And we'll be back with Steve Garguilo in just a moment for the final word of advice. And we're back with Steve Garguilo for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Awesome. So I think if it's about taking action, the biggest thing is recognizing that action is a muscle. Just like some people exercise their biceps, not me, but some people, like it's something that you can exercise. And so if you find that you feel like you're not super action oriented, what are some of the things that you can model to start taking action on stuff right away? It's all about, really small steps. And I hope that if you're the kind of person who's taken the time to listen to a podcast like this, it means you definitely have ideas, and I really hope you will take the time to take some more action on them.
Hey, Steve Garguilo, thank you so much for carving out your valuable time to share your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you.
And Talk Universe, you've got to join us over at round 2 of the bonus round with Steve's organizer hat on. Take care, everybody. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit a fresh recording, and then we'll do a re-intro, and then we'll go through kind of the Blitz round-ish stuff, but thinking as an organizer, and that's just going to be so blasted helpful for everybody. It's so cool. I've had Kathy Armias from Portland on here. She was really the first organizer that really validated what I was doing to be on, and I've had a handful. Sedona Rob.
Anwar, right, was on?
Yeah. Anwar Dafa'Allah. Yeah, he was here, and Rob over at Sedona was here, and I've got a handful of folks.
There's a great podcast called Behind the Red Circle.
Yeah, I love it. All organizers.
Yep.
Organizers only. Powerful stuff. Oh, my gosh. Well, we're going to jump right on back here, and thanks for being willing. You don't have a hard stop, I hope.
I'm good,
because that would be super rude of me. And Arnon, welcome, buddy. It's good to see you. He's on deck. So this is going to rock. So we're going to do a round 2 just because Steve is a former organizer at Johnson & Johnson and Penn State University. Whenever I get this, we have the speaker hat if they've given a talk, which Steve has given many, and then we have the organizer hat on as well. So, Steve, if you will say something, then you'll be the big person on the screen.
I am the big person.
There he is once again, the big person on the Zoom screen. All right, very good. And I'm going to mute Arnon just to make sure that we're really good with the sound quality. All right, we're back on. And Talk Universe, you can always ask a question if you're watching or if you see the replay of this. Really easy way to do that. So we are back on in 3, 2. We are live again with Steve Garguilo with his organizer hat on. Steve, are you ready to talk?
Yes.
So we are back with Steve Garguilo. I'm going to read his bio again. Steve Garguilo works with people from all walks of life from all over the world to help them make their ideas happen. His book, Surge, Your Guide to Put Any Idea into Action, is an Amazon bestseller. Steve is co-founder of Action Surge and partner at Cultivate, and former founder of TEDx PSU, Penn State University, as well as J&J Johnson & Johnson. And that is why we're doing another bonus episode here, which is going to be largely patterned after the Blitz round. Steve has taken off his speaker hat, and the organizer, former and possibly future again organizer hat, is back on. How does the hat feel any different than the speaker hat? Let's start there, Steve. What's the difference? How much easier possibly was it as a speaker, or am I dead wrong about that?
Yeah, it's totally interesting actually having both perspectives, where I think it's difficult for both, so I wouldn't want to equate one as more difficult than the other. Certainly as an organizer, you have a lot more things, going on in your head, and there's a lot more, work in the months leading up. But when you're a speaker, the only thing you could think of is your talk, so that's, totally obsessed too. So I think the best organizers give space to their speakers to let them do, their thing. But organizers are obviously just being pulled in 1,000 different directions. Well,
and they certainly are. So I'll just kind of feed everybody in, because I have a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge. I mean, imagine having a budget, imagine having sponsors, an expensive venue, catering, the most prestigious, knowledgeable, forward-thinking people in your community coming to your event. And it may be because you've been doing multiple events and you've built that up, and then you have your team of volunteers. You're not taking a paycheck as an organizer, which is a lot of things that people do not know. A lot of people would not imagine that to be the case at all. So imagine doing all of this, and essentially at the end of the day, it's a volunteer job just like anything else. Steve, my question for you, I'd love for you to, if you were to organize an event next year, or maybe you are, I mean, how would you do it different now based on just how the whole juggernaut has evolved? Are there broad brush things you would do differently? Would you do a lot the same? How would you approach that now? And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of time novice organizers get really obsessed with wanting to get all the logistics right, and to get the right venue and the right catering and all that stuff. And obviously that stuff is important. But I think the more you go down to it, the more you can delegate, that kind of stuff. And that you can actually really be focused, yes, on the speakers, but even more so on your community and on the participants, right? And I'm very intentional about the word participants versus attendees, which is like, you want to get these people really engaged. This is your community. You want to spark more action, spark more ideas in them. And so I think an obsession with that community and an obsession with beyond the day of the event, what happens next with that group? How do you spark and facilitate that to happen so people don't get to just have the excuse of, well, I did my one day a year to be creative, or my one day a year to do. No, you're not off the hook that easy. This is what it means to be part of this community, and it means doing X, Y, Z as well. And so I think more of a focus on the butts in the seats and what it means for those folks.
Yeah, and Talk Universe, just so that you understand, I mean, that's not a small nuance, attendees versus participants, because this is what it looked like at the event that I spoke at. And this is not uncommon at all. Beginning of the day, everybody's there. Sponsors, corporate sponsors have tables usually in the front. And then as the day progressed, guess what happens to the people in those companies that were sponsored, but they didn't pay out of their own pocket? Fewer and fewer of them are at the prime table seats. And that's the difference in a nutshell between a participant who's really engaged, who really wants to be their real community, versus just an attendee. Now, certainly we love and appreciate and need the sponsors, but there's a higher level. If you're part of an organizing team right now listening to this, this is a level that you can probably easily upgrade. Maybe not easily, but easily identify to upgrade. What are your thoughts on that? How probably 90%, if not more, of organizations struggle with this issue. What could they do even with busy people that aren't able to attend maybe the whole day. Some of these have 40 some speakers, some of the women's events and whatnot. Steve, what are some things that you've seen that have worked, or what would you suggest?
And ideally, the word partner is different than the word sponsor, right? Which is really someone that you're working with. But I know that for many people, they become the same thing. If you think about actually what we did at J&J in terms of bringing TEDx inside as something that was really beneficial for the organization, if you find a company is more interested in writing a check and not interested in really being engaged, think about, well, what if we did something inside your company and worked with you to help you bring ideas to life there? Then they could start to see it in a different way. I'll often challenge organizers. They feel like I can't get a sponsor. Well, could you get a company and do something of value for them inside the company that would want them to then be part of the broader community? And so it's not just write a check, but it's being engaged in the ethos of ideas worth spreading.
And how valuable is that as a partner, as someone that's making a financial as well as other contribution? What I love about that is you're up-leveling the other than financial, the other than monetary contribution to really get closer to the nature of not just a partnership, but you're actually elevating that company's DNA by infusing some of that non-financial, the real DNA of that company, and the brilliance and the creativity of the human resource, the resources of that company. I think it's beautiful.
Unquestionably, because, if you're a TEDx organizer, your TEDx community is a brand as well that you want to cultivate, and you want to be intentional about what that means. And to say that another company is a partner of yours, you want to see their game get elevated, and you want to see them be even more successful, and you want them to speak well of you and all that good stuff. So.
For sure. So now with the organizer hat on, and a lot may have changed in the last 10 years since you were, more actively doing this, but in general, do you advise that people memorize, improvise, or blend? Or, as you've already said, Steve, do you just kind of give them that leeway?
Yeah, I think every speaker is totally different. So it's hard to be 100% because everyone is different. But I always advise, obviously, the most important thing is having something you're really worth saying, which means it's an idea, one thing that will change the way somebody thinks about something. And ideally, it's something that there will be people who disagree with it, right? And so sometimes finding that one thing is the hardest. And often the people who most want to speak on a stage are the people who can be least qualified to speak on a stage. So if you're someone who's listening because you want to give a talk, challenge yourself to, I know it's hard, but step out of your ego for just a second and take a step back and think, what is that one really novel, interesting thing that has never been shared, that people might disagree with, that will actually change the way people think about something? And then how do I work to put that together in such a way that delivers on it? But it requires some real soul searching, because it is a very different type of talk.
Talk Universe, I hope you heard what Steve just said, because he just put his finger on what's different about, a TED Talk, a TEDx talk. There's a few of these branded talks, and they're different because they're short form and they're idea-centric. And because they are idea-centric, that means it's not about me. It's not about Steve. It's not about you being up there to be up there. It's about your idea. It's a meritocracy of ideas, and that's so unlike anything else out there. A keynote, a speaking club thing that you might do, and these are all wonderful things, but this is what's unique, and it's not the big block letters on the stage. There's a magic, and it's not the big block letters. It's the idea centricity of it, and it's the short form, and it's the subjugation of our own speaker egos in the search for something a little bit more transcendent. Steve, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And that's absolutely foundational, which is what is that thing? And then once you're in a place where you have that, then it's about the approach of, okay, what's everything I might want to include? How do I start to winnow that down? I want to have a good balance of analytical and emotional. And then, figuring out the right flow to be able to deliver on the talk. But the methodology of crafting the talk, I think for each person is different depending on their speaking style comfort. But that methodology of what makes a talk, I think is 100% the same for everybody, and making sure to challenge yourself in that way is super important.
So whenever I have a certain type of speaker, or I include organizers on that, I've kind of categorized these after the last 200 some interviews that I've done. I have organizers on, which is wonderful. I have MCs on, I have openers on, I have closers on, and actually it may be 4 instead of 5. I would love. It's easy for me to talk with closers and openers a little bit more specifically. Can you describe the role of the MC as well? Because I like having MCs on because I think it's important for audience members as well as future talkers like Talk Universe are to understand the role of the MC, understand kind of what's going on backstage, and how to be a real clutch player, whether they're in a shorter or a shorter lineup. I was one of only 12, which I consider a very small one. There are others with 20, 30, 40 or more, and you've got to be more knowledgeable. You don't want to be one of the high maintenance speakers that day. So I'd love for you to talk about some of those dynamics as well as organizers as MCs, or if the organizers who aren't MCs, and how to find a good MC and what they do.
Yep, and I've done both. So I've been the MC sometimes as an organizer, and I've sometimes not been the MC. I think when you're looking for an MC, the most important thing, for this kind of event is just keeping the day moving, right? It's not about the MC, being so much that while they in many ways are the face of shaping the event, the best ones do so in such a way where it's not about them. It's very much about the speaker and the next speaker. Like, people who know the talk and who know the talk that's about to come up and can genuinely get people excited for it do way better than someone who's just like, hey, I want to get you moving and clapping and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's very superficial. So that's why I actually like doing it myself more, because I know what I want people to get out of the talk, and I know the energy and the state that I want them in to really receive this next speaker.
Yeah,
so the best MCs can do that, and they help create that right environment for the speaker to succeed as best as she can.
And really, organizers, I mean, they are joined at the hip with you, Talk Universe. From the first time that you submit your video or your application, they're kind of nurturing and cultivating. It's almost like a gardening process, and they know you pretty well. So I agree. I mean, organizer as MC, it's definitely additional pressure and work, but they certainly know you inside and out. And when that can happen, they can really make a unique, knowledgeable contribution. Now, I'd love for you to speak to kind of the role of the MC. Another role is to not just keep the day moving, not just to kind of keep an eye on the time and try to navigate and adjust and be the face of the event. But another issue, which is a lot less tangible, is just gluing the different pieces together. You may have a very shocking talk. You may have a super controversial talk, or all ideas were spreading. You may have a talk that's, about bereavement or death. And then you might have a next one coming down the pike, which is just on, laughter yoga or something like that. And the MC gets to be the person to try to transition from these opposing forces. How has that worked for you, Steve?
Yeah, really great question. Because as a speaker, you might be thinking like, hey, you know what, I'm better in the morning, or I'm better in the afternoon, or I have to leave early. Can you do this? I will tell you.
I love that one. I have to leave early, so the rest of the 42 of you, I have to leave early.
I will tell you, from an organizer's perspective, the agony that goes into the curation process of the sequence of the speakers and going from this subject to this subject is extremely intentional and extremely thoughtful. And typically each session, like each group of 4 or 5 speakers or whatever it is, has been crafted in such a way that if one speaker backs out of this, I have to disrupt the entire day to now think about a new sequence. So that is very, very intentional, why people have been put in the order that they've put in. And then the role of the MC in helping to tell that story is helping share just enough so that the participants understand why and understand that story and get that we're moving through this day in such a way that, like, yes, we're starting big picture and then we're diving into this. And yes, you just got gut punched here and now I want to lift you up. Like, you're creating this emotional roller coaster in a very intentional way. And so, yeah, it's agony. Like, I would write people's names on magnets and then, you go kind of back and forth on a whiteboard and think what makes the most sense. It's not easy.
Yeah, powerful. So what about a situation, and you've done it both ways. So you've had times when you were the MC and then you found other MCs. There may be a whole lot of legitimate reasons why you need to find an MC. What would be some key criteria or way to go about finding a good MC that isn't just going to be a really gifted anchor person from the local news, for example, but to really do the kind of integration that you've already described with partners and things like that? You really know how to bring that together. What would your criteria be, Steve?
Yeah, I think number one would be finding a thoughtful, dedicated person who will be totally dedicated to the whole process the way you are as an organizer. So that's why it doesn't matter if you can get the celebrity person or the local whatever who's going to show up the same day and leave. I don't that in my experience hasn't set the right kind of tone versus a person who's going to sit through rehearsals and get to know the speakers and all that, because you want someone who knows and can convey all that intention. And then the ideal bonus would be, since you as an organizer are so caught up, on breaks and all kinds of other things, you're so caught up on other things, somebody who can be outside being a connector and helping to facilitate the conversations between people, and just walks by somebody, hey Brad, have you met Susan, these kinds of things, who can help set that kind of tone throughout the experience. I think that's an extra bonus. So those are the kinds of things I would look for.
Powerful stuff. We've been talking to Steve Garguilo, and we have been enjoying this talk with Steve Garguilo. He gave a recent talk at TEDx Carthage, but we've got his organizer hat on right now, and this is a bonus episode with him. I want to let you know where you can go to check out his talk, The Science of Taking Action. That's in another episode that we talked about that. You can go to our show notes page at bethetalk.com. More importantly, you can go and connect with what Steve is doing right now at stevegarguilo.com. His last name is spelled Garguilo, stevegarguilo.com. And Steve, love to give you the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Sure. So I think, being an organizer is hard. Being a speaker is hard. If you're someone who's, like I said, out there right now thinking, I want to give a talk and I want to work on this, think less about how do I pitch this organizer to get them excited about me and my great talk and whatever, and try to think from the perspective of, what is this organizer trying to accomplish? This organizer is trying to accomplish amplifying really unique ideas in our local community. And so how can you come to them in such a way where you're saying, I have, or I know of, a really unique, interesting idea in this community that I want to share. Maybe before you even pitch yourself, maybe you find 10 other people in your community who you think would be really great on your stage. And over the course of a couple years, after amplifying them, the person's going to be like, hey, what about you? Like, you seem like you have something great, right? And so I think, try to put that hat on. And I think, it'll work out well for everybody.
All right, Talk Universe, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the ideas. And Steve Garguilo, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's a wrap. Man, everybody from the last hour is still around. My gosh. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any advice for me as I kind of plow forward, just because you've been part of this thing for the last 10 years or so?
This is great. I enjoyed it. My favorite episode, I listened to the episode with the guy from Pocatello, Idaho, because of the whole flag
stuff.
That was fun. I loved that.
Logan was fun. I try to be respectful. I feel like I was tiptoeing a little close to the edge on that, just because the whole talk was this guy, for everybody else, Pocatello, Idaho was voted the worst flag in the world by a design magazine. And then there was a TED Talk that pointed that out and used that as a punchline. And I got the city PR manager to come, who gave a TEDx talk, and that was what we talked about. So I love that you picked up on that. Steve, here's my last question to you, and we're off the right. We are Facebook Live right now, but something that I'm trying to do. I was very involved, behind the scenes, supporting a local group. I've given my own TEDx as well. One of the things that I'm, I think a lot of people have concern about is just, TED is out there, and it's like anybody can use the TED brand for anything, whether they do it legitimately or not, or anybody can call themselves a coach. And I'm really trying to add value to the TED brand without taking and without, being inappropriate about that. What's your thought of that whole thing? We are on Facebook Live. We aren't putting this on the podcast, but I guess more than what your thoughts are, how can I try to stay in a value add mode? From somebody who's been around for 10 years. I just kind of came out of nowhere, it seems. So I'm really open to your guidance on that.
Well, we are in a very interesting place where there are now over 100,000 TEDx talks, right? And there is a definitely dilution in terms of some of the stuff, and even some of the events, some of the stuff people put the brand on. It is what it is. I certainly appreciate that you've been sensitive around that and saying, hey, branded talk, because it's also not just about TEDx, it's about other types of things too.
Yeah.
I think you're adding tremendous value to the community of people who want to speak. I'm trying to think of, hey, what are better ways to get your content in front of more potential TEDx speakers and all that. I think if you've never been to a TED Fest or TED Summit or some of these gatherings of organizers, that's something where you could consider, maybe coming to one of those and meeting some folks, because I think people would be fascinated.
Well, they have that annual Brooklyn one, so I've got a whole bunch of organizer and friends that go there every year. For this first year, I've been putting my head down and just cranking out the 7-day-a-week daily podcast, but yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying. If I'm willing to be looser with the way that I kind of flaunt this brand that I don't really own, then it's going to get seen and picked up more. But that's, I'm trying to at least be more conservative about that, just out of respect to all the other 99,000 of us in a strange way. Yeah.
Well, and I think, it could be as simple as like, every time you have a guest on, tell them, hey, would you share this episode with your organizer who organized the event, and try to get it in front of, more people.
Well, the organizers are the key. So that's why, thank you for putting on your organizer hat. And the organizers definitely are the key with all that. So I was just curious as to your thoughts, because I think at this point, got well over 200 episodes that are live right now. Got way more than that are in the can, that we're running out of days in 2018. We're actually almost out. And so starting out, I think that's the key, just building that trust with people, I would imagine.
Especially because one of the things, now that there's so many TEDx talks specifically, the vast majority of them linger with a very small number of views, right? And part of it is because the speakers don't do a good job thinking about promotion, but also the organizers don't necessarily have the time or bandwidth to go about that promotion path. So I think, showcasing that, hey, this is one avenue for promotion, I think organizers would be very behind, helping to support and amplify these messages.
Well, and that's the idea of the talk. Arnon, we're jumping right over to you, buddy. This is really meant to be a second win for everybody's branded talk. And I'm trying to get people from Q Ideas, which is a little bit more of a faith-based kind of format, as well as Idea City. But those are really I'm sure there are a whole bunch of others, but those seem to be the most major of the major, and they're a whole lot smaller than TED or TEDx. However, by featuring them in the future, I get to use my own word for branded talk instead of just, TEDing everything like I'm trying not to do.
And I like that, too. And 1 million cups is another interesting format, and Google's talks, obviously.
But they're not selective.
They're not as selective.
They're not. 1 million cups, anybody can get out there.
Yeah.
Toastmasters, anybody can get out. Google Talks, I had that on there, and then I realized they were an hour long. So I'm like, I have to take it off because they're freaking hour long. Aspen Institute, I wanted that on there, and then I realized it's an hour long. It's not short form. So now I'm kind of down to 4. But, the idea is I'm trying to signal to people, hey, it's not TED. It's about the idea.
Totally.
And it's
two others to keep your eye on. So
Yeah.
Aspen is looking at doing an on-the-road type TEDx type thing.
Oh, cool.
Happening.
Okay.
And there's a new organization called BOMA, which is founded by the person who founded TEDx, Laura Stein. she started this community. It started in France, New Zealand, and Germany, and they started to develop some content. But some of those original TEDx organizers are now starting to migrate into this BOMA community. So that it could be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
What does that stand for? Because
I think BOMA stands for like I think it's a word in an African language that means like fireside conversation or something like that.
So I definitely want to have my finger on that, because I'm wondering kind of what's the next thing going to be, because this is, it's the early adopters have adopted TEDx, and now it's in the mainstream for some time, which is good. And there are 100,000 stories they leave on the table for someone like me to go into the really fun, good stuff that didn't make the stage. But, I'm also wondering what's the next thing going to be. So thank you for that. Any final questions for me, or any advice to Arnon here, who I'm finally going to unmute? Arnon, man, you're the most patient guy. You get the award.
This was fun listening to.
Yeah, Arnon, thank you for your patience. So no, I'll leave it to you. And thanks so much, Nathan, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, it's an honor having you on. Take care. Thank you. All right, Arnon. Here we go. Let's see. We are on Facebook Live still. I'm going to have the podcast rolling once again here. Let's see. Let me practice your bio and just let me know if I'm mispronouncing anything. So Arnon Kraft has over 20 years of global business and technology leadership. For the past 6 years, Arnon has been with Microsoft as general manager for partner management and strategic sourcing. Prior to this, Arnon's held several executive-level positions spanning from sales and marketing, business development, to operations in various tech companies. 0 to 90 minutes is the title. 0 to 90 minutes in...
0 to 90 days in 18 minutes.
From 0 to 90 in 18 minutes, the first 90 days is what I'm saying. I've got this freaking... PDF thing on my tablet because I'm sharing my screen, and I can't, I don't want to put all my guests' like cell phone numbers on the on Facebook Live right now and get like 200 lawsuits coming after me. So this creates a little bit of a issue here. All right, and then you've got your LinkedIn profile right there, which is great. We'll send them over to LinkedIn and Lynbrook TEDx Lynbrook High School. All right, very good. Yeah, I just interviewed Aaron. I'm blanking on his last name. He was the head of Microsoft in China. Real young guy. He just started his own firm. I think about 100 episodes ago. Seems like 100 years ago. Sometimes a week, and some of these. So, any questions for me? You pretty much saw the format. So, open.
No, I saw the format. I listened to a few conversations you've had over the weekend. It was awesome.
Very good.
Super looking forward to this. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, great. If you can give me a 5 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, we are live in 3, 2. We are live with Arnon Kraft. Arnon, are you ready to talk?
I'm ready. Morning, Nathan. Let's do this.
Arnon Kraft has over 20 years of global business and technology leadership experience. For the past 6 years, Arnon has been with Microsoft as general manager for partner management and strategic sourcing. Prior to this, Arnon held several executive-level positions spanning from sales and marketing, business development, to operations in various tech companies. Arnon Kraft, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Nathan. Good to be here.
Your talk is called From 0 to 90 in 18 Minutes, the First 90 Days. You've been all over, literally all over the globe, especially all over the globe in terms of operations and business management and sales and marketing, all of this stuff. Now you're at Microsoft. You're doing a lot, and it's all tied into your approach to innovation. Please take us behind the talk.
Absolutely. No, thank you. So this whole thing started a few years ago, and I was invited to speak at a TEDx event, as you mentioned, here in California, that was aimed specifically at high school and college students and their families, by the way. And the theme, Nathan, was innovation, and more specifically, innovating talent development. And so they reached out to me through the father of one of the organizers, and we can talk about the importance of networks and investing in networks later. And he asked me if I will be willing to come down from Seattle and talk about my approach to talent development, as a leader and manager here at Microsoft, but more important because he knew of the work that I do as a mentor to college hires, and he knew the work that I do. I volunteer with 2 organizations helping military veterans here transition from the military to the industry. So we had discussions, and he knew of my work, and he asked me to come down and share my experiences and my advice, if you will. And so, like any other person who's about to give a TEDx talk or any talk, I think for that matter, I set course to build a presentation. That's what you do, right? And my first instinct was to build a presentation that talks about tips and to-dos for college students who are starting off their careers, because that was the main audience. And I built a presentation which I thought was incredible. And then the best thing I did was practice with real live people, my kids at first, and then a group of college hires at work. And guess what I found out? I found out it was a good presentation, but how should I put this? Looking at their faces, they all seem to be just a little bit bored. And I could tell this is not the presentation that people remember, and that's what you want to do. You want to inspire people.
Well, that's the painful part. That's when it gets painful, when you realize you're not Jay Leno or Jimmy Fallon or whoever your favorite, Jerry Seinfeld, or whoever it is, and that's when the work really comes back in. So how did you connect? How did you connect with the audience once you realized that wasn't necessarily a natural strength? Yeah.
That is exactly the right word. And, we all know that people relate more to and connect more to stories and emotions than to just lists of bullets. So I had to rethink my entire presentation, and I actually changed it to really just share my own personal story with my family. And then I made that connection to our careers, and especially those first 90 days. And, once I focused on just telling my story, I didn't feel that I need to memorize anything anymore, because I was just telling my story. And specifically, my story was around my experience as a kid moving from Israel to the US. And then years later, after we've already moved back to Israel, going through the same process, but this time with my wife and kids, moving us from Israel to Seattle. And the gist, the summary of that story is that we all know transitions are challenging and difficult. We all know that whether we admit it or not, it depends on our egos, we fear changes. And, starting off a new job or a new position, definitely for a young college kid coming out at a new company or a new team, is always a stressful process to go through. And one of the key points I'm making in my talk is that while all people do their best to prepare for the interview process, most of us don't prepare to what happens after if you actually get the job. How do you prepare for not just getting the job, but to be successful once you do?
Well, and that was my favorite part. That was my favorite part of your talk, Arnon, because it's very similar to an interview I did earlier today, where it's really about culture. It's not about PR or HR 101 and give me your resume and then this is what you're going to do. I love how you turned it around, and that really ties back to your theme of innovation, because you're, software and the tech industry. If you're not innovating, if you're not on the bleeding edge, you're obsolete. You're not going to be around anymore, or you get hauled in before Congress like Facebook did. And 10 years ago, it was barely around 11 or 12 years ago. And now, it could, very, very strong. And then it could be obsolete tomorrow, just depending on not innovating in the right way. So I love what you said, which is everybody in Talk Universe hasn't seen the talk yet. You said have a plan. That should be part of the interview process of what are your first 90 days going to look like? What do you want to do with this opportunity that we're presenting you? I mean, I just think it's really brilliant for other entrepreneurs who are working at large companies like such as Microsoft and other tech companies. You really got to think, who are we trying to attract? What can we ask? How can we distinguish ourselves as a better place to work than all the other places at a time when the economy is pretty hot right now, regardless of what you feel about the administration. The unemployment for everybody, including minorities, is very, very low, historically low, and that's not good news for businesses like yours. You have to work even harder with these kinds of plans. So take us a little bit deeper behind the talk, because I think there are some real gems that you've found in terms of hiring and recruiting and then onboarding, which are the hardest things, the most expensive and payoff items that separate number one from everybody else. What are some of the things you've found, Arnon?
Yeah, that's a great topic. And I gave another talk later. I'm actually within Microsoft, and we talked about how to keep your teams engaged and motivated. And there's an amazing statistic that within the first 2 years, the number of people, especially younger people in their careers, that decide to get up and leave because they want to try something else. And not surprisingly, the number one reason people give to leaving companies, any companies, is not the compensation, and it's not many things that people can think about. It's their manager. Mm-hmm. And I think it is the job of the manager, once they have somebody new, and doesn't matter if it's a college hire or industry veteran, but once they have somebody new coming on the team, to build that plan with them. Mm-hmm. And that plan really sets the expectations for both the manager and the person coming in of what am I going to achieve. Again, it doesn't have to be 90 days, it could be 100 or 120 or 80 days, that doesn't matter. As long as they have a plan and they set expectations. One of the things that it's really easy to see, many people when they start off on a new team, they put this pressure on themselves to say something, to speak up in any meeting.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they come to these meetings with the intent of listening, or I would actually even say hearing, but just with the intent of replying, not really listening to what the other person is saying. And I really think that skill of just listen, that skill of listening is really overlooked, and people put, honestly, that pressure on themselves of, I have to say something to be perceived that I have value. And, part of the plan that I build with people is those first 30 days, and it could be longer if you needed to. It's all about absorbing and listening and getting in information and understanding, what's what and who's against who and how people make decisions in this team and this company. And it's okay to just be an observer and then ask questions later. You don't have to say anything if, don't put that pressure on yourself.
Well, what I'm hearing you say, Arnon, is a manager, really a leader, but as a, someone with the title of manager, you're really seeing yourself as the release valve for the new hire so that they can contribute, that they can make a but you're actually being a leader, and you're proactively going to the person and saying, hey, tell me, what do you see here? I want to make the team better. And you're giving them that private channel of not just being heard and validated by the superior person in the organization, but also being able to contribute in isolation without disrupting all of the empirical reasons why until a certain amount of period of time has gone by and the onboarding has happened. So you keep your team producing, bring on the new talent, but you have like an isolated release valve, and you can then actually, thinking of it this way, then as the manager, as the leader, it can come from your voice instead of the new person's voice, the best of the best idea. Have you ever seen that happening?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah?
That's actually a good point. It's almost like we coordinated this before. One of the first tasks I give any new person that joins the team, they have a unique asset that many people don't realize. And when you're new on a team, one of your key assets is you still have that outsider looking in perspective. You still ask those questions that, trust me, after a few months, you're kind of used to the way we do things because you're part of the team. But when you join, you bring with you your set of understandings and values and experiences from previous companies. And that is invaluable to any company because you bring a different point of view. Now, many people, what they do, they come in and say, yeah, I'm used to do it differently, but I guess that's how they do it here, so that's fine. And the first task I give any new person that joins our team is I ask them, I tell them, you have 2 months to still feel like you're new. And again, you have that fresh and different perspective. I want you to not tell me every day, just write a list of things that you think we can do differently. Don't worry about if it's realistic or possible, just write them down. At the end of 60 days, we get together. And you know what? Even if 50% or 80% of them are not realistic, the rest that are, this is how we get better. And that's really for us, we have a really inspiring CEO, Satya Nadella, an incredible manager and leader. And one of the things he changed about our culture is he changed us from being an organization of know-it-alls to being an organization of learn-it-alls. And there's such a big difference. And just by allowing people to chime in and say, this is what I think we should do differently, and they may be right or wrong, but allowing them to even bring up those ideas and make mistakes, I think that's really how teams become better teams.
We've been enjoying this interview with Arnon Kraft. His talk from 0 to 90 in 18 minutes, the first 90 days. You've been hearing some of the best management and leadership advice. People join organizations, but they quit managers. And this is a great way to put a release valve on not just your team, but to onboard the best and brightest and to really honor your existing team that you have, as well as the new fresh blood that you're going to have that's going to help take you to the next level. Man, there's a whole lot more with this. We're going to be right back with Arnon Kraft for the Blitz Round in just a moment. And we're back with Arnon Kraft. It's time for the Blitz Round. I'm about to ask Arnon a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent, in his case, TEDx Lynbrook High School talk, and I know there were others as well as out there. So you ready to go, Arnon?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, did you apply or were you invited to speak?
I was invited, as I mentioned, by one of the father of one of the organizers to speak. And
the network. The power of networking. So if you're at Talk Universe, you're thinking, hey, I want to get invited. I don't want to. Well, do a lot of network, provide an awful lot of value, and onboard teams like Arnon does. Over time, you might just get the invitation.
That is a key thing. And I listened to your conversation with Sarah Baker Andrews earlier in August. I can't tell you how many people, when they think about building a network, they think about building a network that will able to help me. As opposed to what you just said, Nathan, is when you build a network that you can bring value to, and trust me, good things will happen. But keep that approach and not, I want to have a network that will be able to help me.
Arnon, you walk out on stage. Did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both? Oh,
I definitely had nerves. I mean, I think all the things in life that are exciting and worthwhile doing, definitely if it's a first, they make you nervous. I don't think it would be any fun if, that weren't the case. You practice and you train before, and you definitely have your way to get in the zone, but I was definitely extremely nervous, for sure.
So are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I'm definitely a blender, and I honestly believe if you know the story, if you know the main points you want to get across, if it's your story, then you can just tell your story. And what helped me is just, memorizing the first couple of lines, and then you take it from there. And that definitely worked for me.
So you just mentioned memorizing the first few lines is an absolute must-have. In addition to that, what's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
So one thing I would say is definitely practice with real-life people out loud. Even wear the same clothes you think you'll wear at TEDx. Just try to make everything as familiar as you can when you actually go up and do it live. And that, to me, just seeing people's faces and getting their feedback and even seeing how I feel about it was a big deal. And the other tip I would say that's extremely important is when you do your talk, you sometimes forget to say things that you prepared before and you wanted to say. But guess what? Nobody knows. The only person that will know that you forgot to say something you had planned is you, and it doesn't matter. As long as you, again, get the key messages across, as you tell your story, the show must go on. Never stop and say, oh, I forgot to say something. It doesn't add value. It takes away from it. Just keep with the flow. Again, get your messages across, do it in an emotional way. You'll be fine.
We've been enjoying this blitz round with Arnon Kraft. His talk is called From 0 to 90 in 18 Minutes, the First 90 Days. Absolutely critical for understanding how to approach a new season of employment or change or upgrading, any kind of transition really at all for you. Yeah. You can watch that talk by going to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. We'll have a clickable link in there. We will also have Arnon's LinkedIn profile so you can connect with Arnon. I think, Arnon, you should be cranking out some more of this management leadership stuff, because absolutely brilliant. There are some things that I got just talking to you today that I've never really occurred to me before that are really, really, really simple stuff. And best of all, we're going to be right back with Arnon Kraft for the 10-second final word of advice after this. And we're back. It's time for the final word of advice for Talk Universe with Arnon Kraft. What is it?
So just two things. First of all, start as early as you can to build your networks. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody over LinkedIn or any other way to give you my point of view on that. But start, it's like investing in the bank. Start as early as you can. And definitely when you apply for a new job or any changes in life, as you said, Nathan, don't just think about getting there. Think about how to be successful and build a plan. Plan is not a guarantee for success, but it's a good place to start.
Arnon Kraft, thank you so much for carving time out of your day to come on and share your wisdom with Talk Universe today.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me today.
All right, that's a wrap. It goes by fast.
It does, doesn't it?
All right, Facebook Live. I am going to sign off. I'm going to stay on the line with Arnon here, but we're going to sign off. Don't forget to share and spread the word and spread the message. Take care, everybody.